Okay. Hello, good evening. First of all, I feel slightly uncomfortable here. I'll explain why. I'm quite recent to activism within the Labour Party. A couple of years ago, I was a full-time teacher, so I didn't think a huge amount about politics unless it was going on strike and getting all my colleagues to join me in strike action. But I wasn't hugely involved in politics until quite recently, and I'm sat between two guys who obviously know a lot more about politics than I do. So where I'm coming at my consideration of this question about is Labour too broad a church, I'm coming at it very much from the point of view of my experience, my recent experience, and my personal viewpoint. So it's less academic, if you like. As I say, I was elected to become a councillor for a place called Little Halton a couple of years ago. This is your cue, Tony, to go, woo! I'll try again. Little Halton. Well done. Okay. But as I say, I was a teacher before that, so I'm not used to doing things like this. I'm used to talking to 14-year-olds. So if about half of you can look disinterested, a couple of you could chew gum, so I could tell you off, and a couple of you could ask if you can go to the toilet a few minutes into it. It would make me feel much better. Okay, so Little Halton is an extremely deprived part of Salford. Salford itself is very deprived. Little Halton is one of the most deprived areas of one of the most deprived cities in the country, a place that voted 70% leave. That, obviously, talking to people in Little Halton influences where I come from when I'm thinking about this question, because I'm not talking to liberal elite, if you like. I'm not talking to people who understand all the intricacies of, you know, the different things about the Labour Party and which side you want. It's a much blunter understanding of politics than that. So my instinct to answer this question about, my instinctive answer to is Labour too broad a church is no. I was a teacher of art, so that means that, you know, I fundamentally believe in the importance of creativity and innovation, and politics needs to be creative and innovative, and in order to do that effectively, we need to have a broad range of opinion, a broad understanding of what the potential of socialism can bring. However, I do think that we have a sort of a bell curve of opinion within the Labour Party. So you have this big area in the middle where we kind of get on with each other, and these sort of crazies at each end. You know, the ones who you kind of cringe when you see the comments that they make on Facebook, you know, the sort of people I mean. I have a friend who is a fellow councillor, and one of the things that always sticks in my mind, he says, if we sit in this room and ask everybody to put their definition of socialism down on a piece of paper, you would get as many different opinions as there are people in the room. So it gives you a sense of how broad this understanding of socialism is. One of the things that I thought about when I was thinking about this question is also about what brings people to the Labour Party. We have had this huge influx of people to the party. What makes them want to join the Labour Party in the first place? What is it that their understanding is of what the Labour Party's potential is that makes them want to join in the first place? So I think we have some sort of quite simple, basic, fundamental agreements between all those huge range of people, those close to 500,000 people, I think it is now. I think it's a belief in the state, a belief that the state is an important, the importance of where the state plays in making sure that everybody is able to be successful in their lives, whatever they want to do. I think now it is very much anti-neoliberalist. I think a lot of people come from the point of view that, you know, that is economically not the answer, and it's, you know, neoliberalism is no longer the answer for solving our problems. Sorry, just bear with me. my job as part of the group within my job in the Labour group in Salford, I'm the chief whip. And one of the important things, obviously, that a chief whip has to do is try and hold everybody together, a range of different opinions. So as I say, you know, I'm coming at this from an experiential point of view. I'm trying to get all these different opinions, people from, you know, quite Blairite side of the party to absolutely vociferously Corbynite, and hold them all together and keep them in the same direction. Now, being, you know, that is often, because my view might be different from some of these people I'm trying to keep on board, that often brings personal conflicts from me, from the different things that I do and the different roles that I play within the party. Sometimes, you know, for example, I think often our personal conflicts are reflective of the conflicts there are within the broader party as well. And I think we shouldn't overlook that. You know, we sort of see these differences actually in different parts of the party, but very often those conflicts are personally within us. And I know you talked about you know your issues with Corbyn, and you know I was somebody who supported Corbyn very strongly from the start. I thought this was perhaps the answer to the party after the difficulties we'd been through in the 2015 election. Now I'm starting to feel, you know, as much as I still believe in Corbyn, I can't sell this product. And it goes back to something you were saying about, you know, if we can't actually persuade people on the doorstep, you know, when I go around Little Halton and talk to people, if I can't persuade them that Corbyn is the answer, it doesn't really matter what I think, because we've got to get in power. I have got to be elected next time, because I'm doing important things in Little Halton. If I don't get elected, it'll be UKIP, and they're not going to do the things that I can do there. So we do have to get elected. It's absolutely essential. People have this different, you know, often people talk about, you know, we've got to be realistic, we've got to be realistic. But I think people's idea of reality is not always what you see, it's what you imagine the future can be. So some people imagine that, for example, we can go back to the past, post-war, when we suddenly managed to have all these fantastic changes that the Labour Party brought in after the Second World War. But then you have these other people who imagine the only way we can be successful is to continue that more centrist kind of politics. How do we, you know, these are, it's difficult to deal with those because they are imagined futures rather than anything that can actually be proven. I mentioned before about sometimes the difficulties with those people at the odd people at the ends of the bell curve, and you know the blames that people put because of their how they imagine this future can be. They come up with some really odd ideas about how to create that future. So, for example, the vociferous criticism of the mainstream media, you know, that I just think, you know, you sound very much like Donald Trump here. Can you know, listen to yourself? But then you've got the other end as well, using similar, you know, being similarly odd with the things they say. You know, Mandelson saying about he'd do absolutely anything to stop Corbyn, or Jess Phillips who said she'd stab Corbyn in the front as well as the back, some words to that effect, you know. You know, these things are not very helpful at all, and you know, I tend to want to put my chief whip's hat on, or you know, even my teacher hat on, and say, look, if you can't play nicely, you shouldn't be playing at all. I did read, actually, because I did do a little bit of research, have a look through some of these odd comments, and one person said in response to Jess Phillips' claims today about wanting to be the leader of the party, this guy put, this poor girl has lost her direction, has navigated to the wrong party. And, you know, and I know you can imagine this, the profile picture is there, it's a selfie done in the style of Che Guevara, and usually with a false name, and probably been a member of the party for 5 minutes. But I think one of the things that we have to remember, I mean, probably again because of my experience of being a chief whip, we have a rule book, and we don't often use that rule book effectively. You know, there are things to stop people like Jess Phillips saying the things that she does. She breaks the rules of the Labour Party and should be dealt with. That's easier said than done. But, you know, if that happened a little bit more, it would stop some of this. But the trouble is the rule book is not applied fairly, and it's not applied evenly. As I know, you know, even just in my experience in Salford, you know, as my job trying to apply the rules in that red book, it is not easy because there are persuasions from these different factions. Oh, don't deal with that, that's going to upset that person, you know, we're going to start having infighting, so let's just ignore this one. And very much we often, you know, try and suppress dissatisfaction and the turbulence within the party by not confronting it and dealing with it. Those factions are problematic. Factions, obviously, they drive dissent. They drive out genuine and honest debate. But those factions, we mustn't ignore the fact that sometimes those factions are quite productive as well, because they also muster the energy to place the party in its natural space. So it's a delicate line we tread with these factions. How do we deal with them? And I think remembering some of those fundamental reasons why we all joined the party in the first place help us to hold those things together. As a chief whip, I often try and place myself outside of those factions, but I must admit it's not an easy thing to do at all. Very often I try to be very objective, but in being objective I deal with both sides and end up finding myself in a no man's land in the middle very often. And you know, and the temptation is to veer back to one side where I feel a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more loved. I do think that Labour's in upheaval, and I think you touched on this a bit. After 2015, this upheaval, I think it's an inevitable part of the evolution of politics. I think it's something that has to happen, but I'm starting, probably like many in this room, starting to get frustrated because I feel like we're at a point now we really should be moving on. It's at a time when people need to start thinking about giving a little bit of ground and accepting a little bit of compromise. For me, you know, you don't go into politics without accepting that compromise is part of what you do. If you're not prepared to compromise, you don't achieve anything, because everything you achieve, you cannot do it without some sort of compromise. The Mayor of Salford went down to speak to Sajid Javed recently about adult social care. He worded the motion that we put forward for the council, he worded it very carefully so that the Tories in the opposition would agree with us, and they all went down together. And, you know, so you managed to achieve something by just making some small acceptable compromises. It may not be perfectly exactly what you want to do, but those compromises help you to achieve your goals. So we need to find some common ground at every level of the party in order to move on. I do think we need to use the rule book to silence some of the extremism that goes on in the party, and we need to make the most of what we have in common. And I am an optimist. I don't know if I'm a realist, but I'm certainly an optimist. Thank you.